Hello, I'm Kara O'Donnell, and this is County Board Wrap-Up, our deep dive each month into the key decisions the Arlington County Board has taken and how those decisions will impact you, your family, your neighborhood, and our community. We're joined today by County Board Chair Katie Crystal and Board Member Eric Gutschall. Katie, Eric, thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure.
Now, we're going to be talking today about a couple of public health issues, the expansion of Medicaid and the proposed expansion of Virginia Hospital Center. We're also going to ask the board members about a planned interim salt storage facility for Northern Arlington and the master plan for the future of that site. We're also going to find out more about a master plan for 4 Mile Run Valley Parks. And we say goodbye to the county decal. So let's dive right in with the decision to expand Medicaid coverage in Virginia. What does that mean specifically for Arlington?
So this is a really exciting moment for the Commonwealth. It's been a long time in coming, and it's an exciting moment for Arlington County. There are about 12,500 Arlington households already that that qualify for Medicaid, that are enrolled in Medicaid. This expansion means that there are new groups of people, Arlingtonians who are adults without disabilities, for example, or those whose income was previously considered too high to qualify and yet who really do struggle to get by in Arlington County. The expansion of the Medicaid program to cover these individuals, we expect will bring in about 3,000 more Arlingtonians ultimately qualified and enrolled. This is just an incredible moment. The opportunity for people to get high quality health care, preventative health care, and really establish that firm basis to fully participate in the economy, in school and public life. We're excited about it.
Good. Now, the board voted to accept funding from the state for that. How's that specifically going to be used?
Absolutely. So we did accept some money from the state, and we will also likely have to appropriate some local dollars as well, largely to handle the number of applications that we expect will come in. The full-time employees that will be required to do that kind of eligibility work and analysis, we expect we'll probably have to process about 7,000 new applications. Wow. I mentioned that we expect about 3,000 Arlingtonians to qualify, but even with the expansion, the terms are sometimes a little unclear. People don't know whether they qualify, and so we need those dedicated staff folks who really understand the ins and outs of the qualification to do that analysis. Right,
because it's never a simple process.
Never, especially something involving the state and federal.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Now, is there any downside to this expansion?
Absolutely. One of the things we're really concerned about and have been working closely not only with our own Department of Human Services, but actually our allies and counterparts across the state through the Virginia Municipal League, Virginia Association of Counties, and others, is that unfortunately, as Medicaid was expanded, the state forecasted that meant that clients of our Community Services Board, which is the local entity that serves individuals with behavioral health, mental health, and substance abuse needs, they forecasted that because more of those clients would now be Medicaid eligible, they could go ahead and cut that funding to community services boards. As you might imagine, it's not that simple, right. Especially the funding being cut starting this fiscal year, so starting July 1. Medicaid eligibility won't even go live until January 1. So we're already looking at a 6-month gap where we can't get reimbursements. And we also think that their forecasted reimbursement levels are a little rosy. We're going to have a lot of people who do receive services from our CSB that even under generously expanded Medicaid still won't qualify. This is at a time where we can probably least afford cuts to our critical safety net. We have a challenging budget picture that we'll spend many of the next months talking about. And it's also a time when we know that the needs of our community with regard to mental and behavioral health and addiction, those needs are greater than ever. So we are working again with our counterparts around the state to try to make a pitch for a legislative solution for that in the upcoming session.
Okay, so, and in the meantime, what can folks do who may be affected by these cuts?
Well, so I think individuals will probably, we hope, will not feel those cuts directly. It's going to be really important. I think it remains really important to this board as well as to our staff to ensure that that very critical safety net for people with mental and behavioral health needs stays intact. But it will become a pretty significant burden for local tax dollars to make up, which just creates one more tension on our already limited budget. So I want to make sure that no one feels discouraged from seeking the services that they need. It's incredibly important that those services will remain intact. But interested individuals who would like to help raise their voice to the General Assembly and the governor are welcome to do so, and we'd love their help in getting those cuts to the CSBs, the Community Services Board, restored.
Okay. Well, moving on to, it was a very lengthy board meeting for September, and a lot of that was due to the public testimony surrounding Virginia Hospital Center. Let's talk a little bit about what you heard from the community during that public testimony. where we were, a little bit about the expansion, just kind of what happened with the public testimony?
Well, sure. Well, we had several hours of testimony from all walks of life in the community, both neighbors that live near it and folks that live around the county, and also employees from the hospital also came out to talk about how desperately the hospital needs to be able to expand. And I think that the board really appreciates and understands that the hospital has a very real need to expand, and we're looking forward to that opportunity. But we also felt on the board, we ultimately voted to defer the hospital's expansion plans for up to 3 months in order to allow the hospital a little bit of a chance to go back and work not only with the neighbors but with our county staff, and to look at some really fundamental critical issues here that need to be addressed. So we gave very specific guidance and direction, mostly centered around the circulation of the site, how the site works, making sure that the community has access to the site, that there's pedestrian connectivity through the site. And that's also important so that the hospital center, as they look for future expansion and future growth opportunities, that the way that what we do today fits into a plan for the long range for the hospital.
What were some of the concerns from neighbors of the hospital there that you heard from at the meeting?
Well, they ranged from, they ran the gamut, frankly, from height and massing, how tall is the building, how close is the building to adjacent residential homes, the look of the building, the notion that part of the proposal is frankly a fairly large parking garage, some of which is above ground, some of which is underground. So the hospital had already made some concessions to the community and had put more parking underground, and had also and reduced the height of that. But also that because there's an outpatient pavilion, as they call it, that is joined with the parking garage. So that creates along one of the edges of the property a fairly long, unbroken mass of the building, and that was part of our ask of the hospital center to look a little closer. Mm-hmm. Could they break that up in a way with some pedestrian access, get some light and air in there? Ultimately, though, I think that what you hear from the neighbors in the community is a general angst, an acknowledgement that, yes, the hospital needs the ability to expand, that you can't have a great community like Arlington is without a really great hospital. So an acknowledgement that absolutely they need to expand, but a desire that the hospital would be a little bit more collaborative with the neighbor. I think a lot of neighbors felt that they were willing to meet the hospital more than halfway, but that the hospital was not reciprocating in that. And what we heard from the hospital is that they are very, very focused on their patient experience and delivering the highest quality care, which is totally understandable, right? That's why I think that's the board's job, is to balance those very understandable, somewhat competing ideals. And that's what we've asked, that with our direction, we've asked the hospital to go back and the community to go back and work a little harder and see if we can't resolve some of these fundamental issues.
Okay.
And I think it's important, too, speaking of the board's role, it's exactly the right question to ask what we did hear from neighbors. But I think what's really important is, the board really considered our responsibility not to try to split the difference between neighborhood concerns and the hospital's interests, but to really apply standards and principles of good urban design. Because for so long, that's what's allowed Arlington to grow and expand while keeping our livability. And a great example is exactly what Eric was alluding to, the sort of unbroken wall. We know that's not a principle of good urban design, that functional and livable communities have pedestrian accessibilities through large sites. There's light, there's air, there's visuals that you can see through. People might know instinctively that they don't want to live next to what feels like a big wall. And we have a long history of thinking about these things in terms of urban design. And so I think the board took, it's actually a little bit unusual, the degree to which we really sought to chart out in great specifics the guidance that we expected the hospital to meet in order to improve that design. It wasn't just saying, you've failed to work it out with the neighbors, go think about it some more for 3 months and come back to us. We really wanted to be very clear about what the threshold standards are that have made this community such a livable place as it's grown in the past and what we expect for the future. So I am really optimistic because of the specificity of that direction, because of the willingness of the hospital and indeed the neighborhoods to continue to engage, that there's a really clear path for this hospital expansion, which, as it has been said, is so critical to move forward.
So when it's going to, they will come back to you in December with a revised plan, hopefully.
So December at the latest, but they actually have the option if they can bring a revised plan that meets, again, those standards of good urban design that we laid out. Earlier than that, we're happy to hear it earlier than that as well.
Okay, but if it does take the 3 months, what are your options when they do come forward again?
Well, the board always has the option to, we can defer again, we can deny the application, or we can approve it. And I think we're all, as Katie just said, we're very optimistic that we're going to get to the place where we'll be able to approve it in recognition that the hospital is critically important to the community, but also in anticipation that they're going to do some of the hard work that they need to do right now. But we would always have the option to defer again or to even deny. That would be like a nuclear option. I don't think that's where we're headed. But.
Okay, well, we're going to take a short break now, and when we return, we'll ask the board members about their decision to approve construction of a temporary salt storage facility in northern Arlington. Stay with us. Welcome back to County Board Wrap-Up. Joining me today to talk about the September board meeting are County Board Chair Katie Crystal and Board Member Eric Gutschall. Now, one of the issues that came across is this temporary salt storage dome facility, whatever we want to call it, that the board approved. Why was this kind of controversial, so to speak?
I think the major controversy was that we didn't really follow our standard processes in Arlington for civic engagement about the decision to locate this temporary structure where it would be and to do the rezoning required, take the rezoning action required in order to do so. And I think folks really felt like that was a breach of trust. The reasons that there was not more extensive engagement are twofold, with a much stronger emphasis on the latter. The first is this is a temporary use, right? So we probably wouldn't have done the extensive public facilities review that we might do for something, for example, like a community center that will exist for the next 50 years. However, the more salient reason is that the chief building inspector made a decision or determination that the permanent salt storage facility that has been serving the northern part of the county for many decades was no longer safe to operate this winter.
Which is rapidly approaching.
Rapidly approaching, which left the board with a really constrained timeline. The board expressed, both when we advertised the rezoning in July and again at this meeting, our frustration with that decision. And I don't think any of us think this is optimal, nor the way that we would like to proceed in Arlington in terms of civic engagement notice and beyond. So that was the source of the controversy. We are looking at, I think, some really diminished opinions of the county and how we do our process. And so as we think about not only the setting up of this temporary facility, but the long-term master planning for the site, which we can talk about in greater depth, we're all recognizing we have both an opportunity and are at a little bit of a deficit to rebuild trust right now, particularly with the neighbors surrounding this site.
So when you say temporary, how long are we talking?
That's a great question. It depends a little bit on how quickly the long-term visioning exercise moves forward and is completed. The long-term master planning task force, for which we adopted a charge this month and which will appoint members next month, is asked to consider the future home, permanent home for the salt facility. And so as they are able to conclude their work, if there is a clear recommendation for where that permanent facility can go, and as we're able to identify the money within our capital improvement plan, we will be then able to take down the temporary facility. But it is temporary in terms of a matter of years, probably about at least 3 years,
okay.
Potentially maybe a little more rather than, for example, months.
And this was needed immediately for safety issues, correct?
Yes, it was. We have to be able to service our roads. And you never know, in the area that we live, right? It could turn out that we have no snow events, no major events this season. And of course, it could snow. It doesn't seem like it today, but it's really and truly snow in November is not uncommon.
Unusual, yeah.
And so we wanted to make sure that we were ready by November 1. And if we didn't have that ready, then our ability would be extremely hampered to service all the roads, in particular the neighborhoods in North Arlington that are serviced by this location. So we had to make sure that we were in place by November 1.
So is the task force then to study the permanent location? Is that already underway, or are they already doing their work?
Actually, and in the task force's scope is considerably larger. So a great reference point here might be if we think about the community facility study, that landmark group in 2015 that made a series of recommendations about improving joint planning, actually, between counties and schools, developed for us a use determination process. When we have a patch of land in the county, and this one, the area around the salt facility is 7.6 acres, what are the steps that we work through to think about what could fit here, what should go here, what's compatible for those uses. So this group will be studying not only the permanent home for salt operations, but also mulch storage, leaf operations and storage, some of the other industrial or light industrial needs that are important for serving the county, as well as open space, something like parkland uses there. And we've really tried to keep it as open-ended as possible. We suspect there might be members of this group that are interested in studying school facilities, housing, others, really more outside-of-the-box pictures. We don't presume what their conclusions will be, and we want to make sure that they're set up to really have a wide-ranging conversation. That's something that I think we've really heard throughout the county, that we not set the box too small. And so we've really tried to not do that with this group and leave it open-ended. We've asked them to think about uses that are consistent with adopted plans or policies, so we're not totally out in left field, right? But I think there'll be an opportunity for them to really explore some ideas beyond those that are specifically described in the charge.
Okay. Well,
If I can add on that, the great opportunity that we have here is there's lots of uses that the county needs to find places for that people don't always think about, right?
well, they're not the most interesting or
or even highly visible. And so we've spent a great deal of time, though, working with the community and discussing with the community through the Joint Facility Advisory Committee that looked at when we were contemplating acquiring what's known as the Buck site on Quincy Street across the street from Washington Lee High School. And we did acquire that site, and there's a lot of opportunity there that still needs some planning to go with it. And so the whole point here is that we do have a chance, as Katie just described, to really take a very long-term look at how can we get the most out of this property and do it in a way that is compatible with the neighborhood.
kind of an open book essentially that you're giving this task force is, here you go, here's what it's been used for, here's everything we need, what's going to work in this area.
Yeah.
All right. The board also approved a master plan for 4 Mile Run Valley parks. Now there is that overall 4 Mile Run master plan, Valley master plan, but this one is exclusively to the parks. Tell me a little bit about this.
Well, what we did is we adopted a comprehensive master plan for Jenny Dean Park and Shirlington Park. And we also made some short and midterm recommendations for maintaining and improving the Shirlington Dog Park. But what we were doing really was implementing the framework that was adopted previously by the board. And so it's really a fulfilling of the vision that the neighborhood and the community worked on for several years. And we had a great process that came through. And while there wasn't unanimity in the community in terms of some of the final decisions, I think ultimately what we've done is we've set in place now the opportunity to make a substantial investment in that area of the county. It's going to be a wonderful opportunity, lots of facilities for all different needs, whether you want to do an active kind of use and play on some of the recreational fields, or you want a more passive kind of use and want to be able to just have a cookout or barbecue or picnic with your friends or family, or you just want to sit restfully and enjoy the great outdoors, there'll be lots of opportunities for folks.
Okay, and now how does this plan work into the overall 4 Mile Run Valley
Sure,
master
you can
plan.
think about it, I guess, as kind of a drilling down, right?
Okay.
The overall 4 Mile Run plan is so much beyond just parks facilities. It's about transportation for the area, how land use might change for the area, thinking about the future of housing in the area as well as commercial uses. This is really kind of drilling down into the parks facilities in particular. What's interesting, though, is that I think it was the parks facilities in particular that were the most controversial throughout the 4 Mile Run process. So this really did get to the heart of the matter and some of the pretty strong differences of opinion. You know, we're seeking throughout to balance those interests right up into the end. For example, one of the comments that we heard from the civic association that is most immediately adjacent to Jenny Dean Park was a desire for more openness between the park and the neighborhood that looks across it from 4 Mile Run.
Okay, well, we're going to take another short break now, but when we come back, I'm going to ask the board members about those scooters you may have noticed around the county, and we'll also talk about the disappearing decal. Stay with us. Welcome back to County Board Wrap-Up. Joining me to talk about some of the decisions the board took at its September meeting are Board Chair Katie Crystal and Board Member Eric Gutschall. So the dockless scooters, we have all seen them around the county. They've been popping up all over the county as another mode of transportation. The county took some action on the scooter program, for lack of a better way of putting it. Tell me a little bit about what happened.
You know, this is such a great example of why they call it disruptive technology, right? The scooters have been in our county really since mid-July.
I was to say summer.
So it's been a remarkably fast process. And we didn't have any sort of regulatory framework for them when they arrived. What we've sought to do is create a pilot. We know we have a ton of opinions about scooters in the county. What we don't have is a lot of data about how often they're being used, where they're being ridden, where they're being left. We have many anecdotes, but not enough hard data to actually look at. And I think the board, consistent with our approach actually to a number of disruptive technologies, be it Airbnb or free-floating car sharing programs, really sought to study the issue before we seek to make changes to our code one way or another. So what we did in our last board meeting was approve a pilot and empower the county manager to enter into a series of agreements with scooter companies and dockless bike companies, e-bikes, that wish to be in the county. That pilot includes some new regulations or some new restrictions. I guess they're not codified, so they're not formally regulations, but a lower top speed for scooters, for example. That's been one of the safety things we've heard about as an issue. And basically tried to create a framework under which we could study this issue for the next 9 months before we take regulatory action. The things we'll be collecting information on are some of the things we've heard most about from constituents. How many scooters are too many? What is the demand and how does that match with what our infrastructure is set up for safely, bike lanes and beyond? Where they can be left and how quickly they can be collected when they're left somewhere that might pose a tripping hazard or a right-of-way obstruction. And then, of course, a number of other issues. So, again, we're looking to gather data and we're looking to gather public input in a sort of more rigorous way, less ad hoc, through a number of engagements with commissions, open houses, and the community.
I know one of the things I've been hearing as a benefit to these scooters and the fact that they are dockless is that they really help with that last mile, getting from a transit stop to someone's home, office, what have you. Are you seeing similar anecdotes from the community?
Absolutely. I think that's what makes them so attractive, right? They're not meant, you're not going to see folks, I think, riding on scooters for great distances, going miles and miles, taking them from here, out to Fairfax County or across the district. But what you are going to see is they do provide that really, really critical connection, what is often termed the last mile, which is so critical because that's what enables people to use transit as a choice. So if it's easier to get to a metro stop, if it's easier to get to a bus stop that is maybe not an easy walk, but then would be a relatively easy scooter ride, as long as we can come up with a way that we can do that is safely, that respects other modes of travel, whether it's other drivers that need to be on the lookout for scooters as you would share the road with bicyclists. And then we need to, I think, also work to develop a culture among the scooter riders that is also respectful of pedestrians, others, and cyclists, and vehicles and other. So it's really all about that connectivity. I personally believe that what we're witnessing is there's just going to be more to come. This is the first of probably many disruptive sorts of technology. And when I'm speaking with folks and I totally understand that there's a natural inclination to really be focused on safety, and safety is paramount, no question about it. Safety for the riders of the scooters, safety for those around them. But it's also, I gotta wonder what it would have been like many, about 100 years ago, right? When someone said, "Oh my God, have you seen those horseless carriages?" Right? And the people, and there was no culture, nobody knew. So even the first folks that were getting in cars at that time didn't know what the power necessarily of what they had under them. And so it took a little bit of time, and that's what this pilot is about. The pilot is about, let's get our bearings, let's take a deep breath, let's understand, let's study, let's look at in a somewhat controlled environment, and we'll figure it out.
Right, and we'll see what happens. I mean, in a county where we pride the various modes of transportation that we can offer folks, and also to reduce the number of single-use passenger vehicles all the time, it could provide another option. We just need to take a look at how it's working.
Absolutely, and we're going to spend the next 9 months doing exactly that.
All right. Well, and speaking of vehicles, the board approved a plan to eliminate a long-standing thing, those decals. Why did this become a priority?
Well, it's the evolution of technology, right? And it's the fact of the matter is it's now we have readily available license plate reading technology that we do to make sure that cars are registered, to make sure that if a car for any other reason shouldn't be on the street there, shouldn't be on the road. And so it's a relatively simple step actually to just cross-reference the license plate with have you paid your county taxes. And the decal is going away, but the tax is not going away. So it's just a different, more modern, much more reliable, frankly, because it's not dependent on whether or not an enforcement officer happened to notice your decal was in the right place or not. So it's more reliable, and it's just modernizing where we are. So it's a little bit, I think, with a little bit of sadness that we mark sort of the end of the era.
Yes.
I mean, it's a long-standing tradition, and I'm optimistic that we will find other opportunities. There are no shortage of opportunities to inject creativity and artistic interpretations into lots of different things that we do around the county. So I think we're going to be all eyes and ears open for looking for new opportunities to sort of transition that tradition to some other venue. But the decal it'll be November 15th next year will be a thing of the past.
Yeah, July 1, 2019. It'll be the end of an era.
Yes. So, but folks shouldn't jump the gun. They should keep their decals
Please
on
do.
the cars
Absolutely.
for now.
Absolutely, they should. And as you ceremonially discard it, as Eric mentioned, one of the biggest questions we've gotten is, great, that means I don't have to pay the fee anymore. And what the fee is going to help us do is do that enforcement work that Eric mentioned, the license plate reader, which does still require some human effort as well as some new technology. And we appreciate people's willingness to pay that fee. And actually, what it does, and this is a point that our treasurer and our commissioner of revenue both make often, is ensuring that everybody pays keeps everyone's taxes lower, their personal property taxes as well as their overall property taxes. It's a fairness issue. So it does require a little bit of a pretty modest fee, but we think people really are getting the dividends of that. One of the things that's great in Arlington, and we actually heard from our treasurer about this with regard to property taxes during our recess board meeting this month too, is we have a very low rate of uncollected taxes in terms of, again, both personal property as well as property, and that means everyone can pay less than they might otherwise have to.
All right. Well, that will bring us to the end of another county board wrap-up. I hope you've enjoyed our chat with the county board members about some of the important decisions that they made at their September meeting. Remember, All of those county board meetings are open to the public. They're also live streamed and archived on our website, which is arlingtonva.us. Just search County Board to find them. And if you want to tell us what you think about these issues and more, visit our engagement page at topics.arlingtonva.us/engage. I'm Kara O'Donnell, and we'll see you next month right here on County Board Wrap Up.